Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another video where we are not looking at the Legend of Zelda franchise, because today we're revisiting a topic from over a year ago. Because when the LEGO Icons Medieval Market Square launched in 2024, I was mixed. There are parts I loved. I really loved the concept of the set and a lot of the execution, but because we had had a certain large leak about a year before, which showed this set earlier in development, I found myself rather attached to elements of that other version. So after a year of putting it off, I actually sat down and sort of had a tweak and fiddle around, and a lot of this was actually revolving around returning the model to its leaked version, and you'll see that as we take a look through. But it left me with a conundrum because I'm still not happy, and I don't know, maybe it's somewhere in between. Maybe the set could never be what I want it to be. But come with me as we take a quick look at the changes I've made, what I like about it, and why I'm still so conflicted on this set a year after making a video where I was conflicted on the set and then supposedly fixing it. But yeah, let's dive straight in and take a look at what I did. So you'll notice straight off the bat that one of the big changes made was not to this building. Only one of them really has a substantial change to it, and that is the what I'm going to call the farmhouse set of buildings. And largely the set is the same. On this overall image, you can see that the central village tree is not something I hated, but is something that has gone, and in fact that tree has moved over to the inn. Speaking of the inn, the other big change here is the roof colour on the red section, which is a little uncontroversial. I'm not sure what it's actually trying to represent, but we've gone for the new reddish-orange colour, and that part does actually come in that colour in a couple of sets starting in 2024. Notably, I think it was a Friends Beach Shack. But anyway, the part is viable, so it's interesting, and I actually quite like how this contrasts, but more on that later. The other big changes, of course, is in a couple of side build, most of these inspired by stuff that we could see inside the leaked version, but of course it's all over on that villagey building side, where the cheese shop has been extended for a full second story. That was the part of the original set that I disliked the most. Some color changes have happened, and the roof on the central building now looks quite similar to how it did originally, but has actually gone through several iterations, and we got some new trees and stuff as well. But let's talk mostly about this new build here. So the biggest thing I was trying to fix was this building, because to me it didn't feel cohesive with the inn and tower side. Instead, it felt like that was from a medieval village and the others was sort of like a farm outhouse building. So by extending the house and changing the style slightly, I think I've achieved the look that I was hoping for, and obviously that has resulted in mostly changes to the cheesemaker's house. However, before we focus in on that, you'll notice I've made some slight alterations to the garden underneath the dark broom roof house, which is the tapestry shop worker, just to bring it more in line with that colour and sort of charm that I felt from the original model, which didn't necessarily translate into the final release. Now, it was pretty close, admittedly. A lot of this stuff has stayed the same, but we added a butterfly back. Creatures were a thing that got cut significantly between the original leaked image, and my favourite detail for this build that changed was adding the sand green little highlights to the dark brown roof instead of dark tan, which was something that was there again on the leaked version, and I actually really like how that looks. I think I also changed that wheel arch to black as well to match the sort of wood styling instead of white, which yes is less contrast, but I don't know, this model's turned a little bit grungy, but not in an awful way, and it's still in a fantastical setting. Off to the side for this Tapestry Maker's Workshop, I added back in the larger beehive setup, which we saw in the leaked version, alongside a couple of crates, some of which have honey, some of which have some apples and different bits in. But you've got 3 beehives, so I removed one from the side of the wall, put it on this own stand, and I've added some flowers here for the bees to pollinate, and these are inspired again by the leaked designs. You're going to hear me say that a lot, but specifically I really liked how those looked, using the fern pieces to be these more upright blooming flowers that maybe aren't, again, realistic to the actual real flowers, but do look good in this fantasy setting. And then of course we have a tree here. I don't know, I just felt it was weird that we cut it for this kind of janky looking center village tree. I wanted some height back in, so I added 2 full height trees in, 2 different varieties. Yes, this one is very old and stylized, kind of only saved by that newer leaf piece, and then a second one which you'll see in a minute. But I also did keep the village tree, because obviously if I'm buying the set to make these modifications, I don't want to waste those parts, but I attached it to where in the leaked version there was another tree over by the inn, just to give it some variety, and I kind of like its almost willow-esque component over there as well. When you lay this one out, this one is largely unchanged. The big physical change to the inn is that the roof at the top has been rotated 90 degrees so that they both face in the same direction. This is personal preference, really nothing major here, I think, that alters that. And then the changes to this building were largely obviously the roof and then the interior, besides the addition of the tree, which keeps all the mushrooms and frog and water detailing from before. And I just like that it adds this splash of green and really sort of sets it in that English forest, which I quite appreciate. I know a lot of people changed the sort of half timbered effect on the inn to reddish brown instead of dark tan and olive, and in the end I tried it and I prefer this one because it's that more subtle look, which I don't know, fits the more realism side that I again wasn't aiming for with this model but did end up happening. So here it is with that version, and it's that more wattle and daub effect, which I quite like a lot, and I did indeed cape. But we'll talk about the interior of this building later. Instead I want to jump back up to showing you the full exterior of the farmhouse. I particularly like it when it's closed up because it feels like this cluster of buildings, which feels more appropriate than the original farmhouse was, which looked like three separate buildings that were weirdly joined together and it just didn't make much sense. Whereas this more so feels like a town building that has been expanded upon, like we saw in Renaissance medieval London and stuff, with these different layers and these different effects and stuff. It almost feels like the stone building is the original, and then they expanded it with an outhouse, and then a neighbour came in because remember there were no fire breaks between buildings back then, and I just like that a lot. So one of the things that I did change was the barn. Originally that window was open and I still liked the idea of having the loft, but so that the loft crane is still here, but I wanted it to have like shuttered windows to make it look less like an outdoor shack and more like a furniture workshop with a loft space, because I really wasn't a fan of how open that was. So a lot of that closing up has been done there. But again, I wanted to keep all the wildlife, keep all of those elements as well. I didn't change any of the doors, keeping that new medieval door, which I quite love. And when I'm not a huge fan of the dark green door on the tapestry workshop, I did end up keeping that as well, just for variety's sake. But in the end, I'd end up keeping the sort of tan thatched roof on the centerpiece. Now, I didn't want to do this because it wasn't what it was in the leaked version. It was actually a slate roof, but it was pointed out to me, and I'll show you this version now, but it just wasn't realistic. But do let me know what you thought. We started off with this single-sided red roof that sloped up with a mix of red and dark red tiles and this brown trim around it, and I like how this looks visually. However, it does not fit this trio of buildings. So after some thinking, I tried the colours into a more natural terracotta-y medium nougat and dark tan, not dark tan, dark orange, and that still was a little bit better, but it didn't really fit. So in the end, I tried the original roof style that was on here, just modifying it to match the cutaway. And in the end, I think this settles as a compromise between the two versions, which you're going to see is the theme of my thoughts that I kept coming back to, is having this compromise. Now, one thing I didn't compromise on and did change and revert back to its original form was the building on the right, which is the cheese workshop, where the original colour of the ground floor building has been modified, bringing back dark tan as the predominant colour, and the normal tan is obviously to show sort of a wearing effect, but actually that's really important for the build because those parts don't come in dark tan, and I'm sure I could find a solution around it, but it was significantly easier just to keep those in their tan colouring originally. All of the fence pen is kept the same, despite that not being the case on the leaked version. But then I added in this second floor, and you might be going, well, why is there this big red or reddish brown rim around the outside? And that is realistic to what was there, and I actually quite like it. It's quite striking, even though it looks quite ugly. And then above that, we have sand green and dark brown, dark brown specifically, for the timber effect up here. And you could argue there's too much timber, and I personally think there are too many of the claw roofs that you see on this building as well. But I just like how they're used, and it does bring that consistency in with the Lime Knight's Castle. And I don't think it's as bad as it was, say, when we had two of the roofs that's now on the middle building, because I really didn't like that roof specifically on the cheese hut. Of course, adding this second floor means we've got a new interior, which I'll show you again later on. But on the top, we have a removable roof, which again uses the dark tan claw pieces, and then the dark green this time for the accent piece, which I really love, showing that moss growing in. And as we rotate around to the side, you'll see a second pair of windows. I kept all the bees, this really crooked, kind of almost fantasy-esque chimney, which I don't have a problem with at all. And then a bird's egg and a red bird. Again, this is something that was actually here. It was a bird's nest, it didn't have an egg, but I added an egg to this version of the model that was there from the leak. Now, as I said, I kept the goat's pen, but I did want to add something to it because there was this gorgeous fir tree here in the original, and I've been loving the new fir tree design that's been popping popping up, across so many different themes. So you'll see we've got one here. Honestly, it should probably be taller. I would like it to poke out from the top of the house, but that would just look a little bit out of scale. So instead of having all these prefab ones, I did indeed put a fir tree back in here. And this one has an owl on the top because owls were, once again, another animal that was missed out from the set. And while they're not in studio, I suppose it's also potent to mention that I did want to have another ox cow in here, as well as a calf and some chickens as well, which were other animals that were either in the leaked version or I thought would suit really well that just didn't show up. But yeah, this building is relatively unchanged around the back. The only other change I made to the central building is actually to add a couple of dark bluish grey bricks instead, just to add a little bit more contrast and a bit of texturing to the model. And you'll see there that there's a cutout of the roof in the centre now, which adds a bit more visual interest, but obviously it stops it from getting in the way of the new second story of the building, which is why I changed the roof originally, and you can see that a little bit clearer from up top. But yeah, I really like that second floor. It's my favourite part of the new addition. Now, as I mentioned, it does open up on that second floor, and this is actually where I made the painter's workshop too, as well as I don't have a problem with the fact that the building interiors don't connect. It did feel like a downgrade compared to the Lion Knight's castle, where every room connected and the two halves sort of felt cohesive. So it made more sense for this sort of separate interior to be its own business. So taking off the roof, you can see that all the shield painter stuff has been moved over. There's basically nothing new apart from a couple of new tables, but all the stickers and paint splotches were still in here. So you've got the place to boil the paints and stuff, the paintbrushes dripping paint on the floor, the cotton that's being used to make the white, as well as the anvil to obviously flatten out the shields, all the blank shields, the inspiration painting on the wall. It's all in here, and it just feels so much better to me as a second story business. I know some people didn't feel that way, but I really like it being out of the way compared to everything else. And all the other interiors in this area are actually pretty much the same, I'm pretty sure. No changes there. Instead, the real changes came over in the inn. Firstly, I was going to move the kitchen down to the ground floor because I didn't like it being a second story kitchen, but in the end I chose to compromise because the new room I wanted to add worked much better on the ground floor. And now when you open it, you could almost imagine that the knight is sharing a bedroom, or like the bedroom of the people that own the kitchen rather than the person that watches the watchtower. I mean, that's not the headcanon I'm going to keep, but it just works a little more better now. The big change I made to the kitchen on the second floor was I moved the log pile away from the oven, which you may be going, why would you move it away from the oven? That makes a lot less sense. And it's actually because when you close up this model, it actually almost creates an entrance. It's really hard to see, but it actually physically means you can get into that second floor for the kitchen, which feels slightly better to me. I don't know why. As I said, I really wasn't bothered by the lack of stairways, but it just, something was itching at me, and there was a gap right there, so I chose to make that a feature this time, so that is the case. Now, as for the ground floor, of course, this is where the addition was. I just chose to expand the common room. It felt like the best use of this space, and ties in with one of the new minifigures we're going to add to this, because in the original leak we had a jester or town performer, and you'll see there's a side build for him later, but I thought we could have a back part of a tavern, a bit more like a D&D setup, but also just general fantasy inn. We've got a little stage for someone to perform or play music, maybe the forestman from the castle set, and for people to gather. And so you've got a table with mugs, a pot for the money to go in, a candle still dripping on the floor like was here originally, and a bell. I don't know why the bell was here, but it made sense as a detail. And then a little stage for someone to perform to all the patrons of the inn, which I think is a nice touch. I quite like that. So I continued the floor patterning in here. You'll notice the board in the back. That's actually all the boards from the tree. Now, I really liked the village communal tree having all these wanted posters on, but when I moved the tree, it made slightly less sense, so I changed it to have all the boards featured in here. So this will be like your wanted basil and like missing goat reward poster, which I think is a cute detail. It's another acceptable use case for it, I feel. And yeah, it's a little sad that the tree is missing it, but I think we'll live. And as I said, I really like the tree's presence here, so I'm fine with that. I actually really like how the new reddish-orange roof peeks through when this building is folded up. I think it looks great from both sides. I'm really, really happy with it. And I just, yeah, it was really subtle changes, but I really, if you listen to the first video I did on this set, I really didn't have too many problems with this of the two buildings. I thought this one was fine, and I liked its style a lot better, and it fitted with the Lion Knight's castle, and I really loved the tower integration as like a watchtower over the village. The settlement outside really fitted that vibe. Oh, and you'll notice in its render as well, there's a new bird, and he's stealing a bit of thatch from the roof to build a nest in the eave, which is a detail I was able to get because of rotating the roof, which I really quite love. So yeah, really happy with that. As for the side builds, before we wrap up, we've got the new one, which I meant was for like the Jester Juggler. So these are two stilts. This is again something I took inspiration from the leaked version. So he's got a pot again to put money in, and then he can walk on these stilts. I'm pretty sure a figure could hold these I think if you get the posing right, I think it's doable, but that is something we'll have to try in real life whenever I do these mods. We also have the cheese stand, which is unchanged. This was another example of compromise where I really like the roof on the leaked one, which is what you can see here, but I love the cheese and the way it actually displays all the cheese much better in this version. So compromise, again, between the two, which is great, but that's what it's all about. And then we've got this axe stand, which was from the original set, but I added the actual wood that you're chopping down. I like to think of this as the village tree that has been chopped down, but this is again just another build stolen from the leaked set with a slight bit of alteration. And then everything you're seeing on screen now has not been altered, so that includes all the figures, excluding of course the new jester, all of the tapestry shop stuff, all the carpentry stuff, which I really liked, and that will go inside the carpentry office once I figure out how I want to do that. And then a new weapons development table as well, and the cart and wagon. So that's everything there. And then this is what it looks like all together. Now I did actually do a couple of renders where I put it next to the Lion Knight's castle. It doesn't look the best because the render style is different, and of course I also had to add the siege encampment because I do have a siege encampment on pre-order, and I'm very excited about that. You'll see why in a future video, because I'm prepping something custom medieval, a bit like what we did with the Ice Planet Troopers. So stay tuned for that if you enjoyed the Ice Planet Troopers, but no one's still watching by this point. But I mentioned that I still feel conflicted. So these are the changes I made. I'm definitely happier with it. I feel the buildings are now more cohesive with each other, and I've come to love the central building of the left set a lot more than I did originally. As I mentioned, I went through several iterations of the roofing, and while at the end I don't love what we're left with, I think it's significantly better than the slate roof that we originally had. I think maybe that building was originally intended to be more towering, but adding windows surprisingly made a huge difference to bringing it in. And for those of you thinking that the mods weren't particularly extreme, that's right, because generally speaking, it was a lovely set, and it was something I wanted to own in its form that I saw originally, and then in its form as a set I still liked. It just wasn't quite enough to put me over the edge. So perhaps now I will actually feel comfortable picking up a used copy off eBay, making my modifications, and then placing this next to my Lion Knight's castle, because when it was first rumoured, I was more excited for this than I was the Lion Knight's castle, and it executed it in building technique and figures and all that was great, but there was just something off about it, and I still feel there's something off about it, but I don't know if that's just my brain being never satisfied. I really don't know, but I'm not going to dwell on it. I felt conflicted in the last video. Even though I've completed these mods, I still feel slightly conflicted, although the more I look at it, the more I'm just like, it's a great set, Octane, just buy it. But like, yeah, hopefully this adds something. There are definitely some flaws with the modifications, but I particularly like what I did to the left building. But I'm going to pass it off to you guys now, and you guys can let me know what you think, which version you prefer, whether it's a set you've considered buying or not, and whether you think this might change your mind. I may do instructions. If I end up doing it, I'll do instructions, but I think I'm finally ready to put this one to bed and sort of just leave it be. I'm content. I'm not satisfied, but I'm content for now. Maybe it needs more buildings. Maybe it needs like a watchtower or like something, or like more animal pens. I really don't know. Or maybe just when I see it come to life, it will feel different. But yeah, let me know what you think, and I will see you again next week. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.